that. I think it's something that I have asked you, but as I understand it, the people that worked on this assignment, 3 or 4 people that worked and ran calculations and the like, that didn't include Wood and Pillay.
Sorry, couldn't you?
Wood and Pillay weren't on the scene advising you on a day-to-day basis?
No, not that I recall.
To what extent, and I might have asked you this already, you must forgive me if I have, to what extent did you deal with Mr. Wood and Mr. Pillay in the context of the post-tender negotiations?
I think if memory serves, they had deployed, I think, 2 or 3 individuals that worked together with Mr. Smith and Mr. Lahe.
Yeah.
On a, let's call it, maybe on a daily basis, if that. My interactions with either Mr. Pillay or Mr. Wood on these matters would probably have been a weekly interaction, I would say, at least.
All right. Going back to paragraph 5, so the results indicated that the price being offered by the bidders was reasonable, and then it says, given that the forex escalation, economic factors and batch pricing impact is subject to market conditions, it can be deduced that the final contract price is also reasonable. Is that correct?
That's correct.
So in other words, you said the price on offer is reasonable, and then these changes, they're all market conditions and market related, therefore the final contract price is reasonable.
That's correct.
So the point of departure was the regiment's assessment that the price on offer was reasonable.
Yes, and I think the more important point of departure, Mr. Chair, was actually the adjudication process that got us to that point, because that was reflective of what the market was willing to offer at the time. And that to me was actually more an indicator than, I think the regiment's capital assessment was, let's call it a level of comfort rather than the process. Because the process that up to that point in time, Mr. Chair, had been, was an open market tender. It was evaluated according to the evaluation criteria that was set by TFR. The cross-functional evaluation teams had evaluated them and come up with a best and final offer price at that stage, which was reflective of the market.
Yes, but this is paragraph 5 of your memo. I mean, yes. It's an important step.
Yes, yes.
I mean, you can't, you're not suggesting otherwise.
No, no.
All right. Then if I could take you to page 722. There's another reference to regiments. A historical regression analysis conducted by Regiments Capital indicates that the ZAR currency is on a trend of devaluation, as indicated in Table 5 above.
That is correct.
And then if you go over the page to paragraph 43, the cost to hedge this exposure was obtained from banks by the suppliers. This was vetted by Transnet Treasury and Regiments Capital for reasonability. Is that correct?
That is correct.
So that's the hedging costs?
Yes.
And then we deal with escalation over the page. And you'll see at 59, again, reference to regiments. Escalations of input costs have been verified by Transnet by using publicly available data and by Regiments Capital using their intellectual property methodology and techniques. Is that correct?
That is correct.
And then if you go to page 730, you will see that under or paragraph 107, says data quoted in this memo above has been sourced from, and then 1, 2, 3, the fifth bullet point, Regiments Capital Transaction Advisory Services. Do you see that?
That is correct.
Now, I'd like to go back, please, to paragraph 80 at page 727. It says that the updated NVP results in a positive NPV of 11.68 billion at the new hurdle rate of 15.2%. and 22.71 billion at the TRF WACC of 12.6. The NPV would become a negative 1.67 billion at the original hurdle rate of 18.56%. Do you see that?
That is correct.
Perhaps, Mr. Singh, for us lesser mortals, if you can decode what this means in simple terms.
Before he does that, for the transcript, in paragraph 80, it's NPV. I think it was, with regard to the first one, it came across as if you were saying NVP, Mr. Maybeck.
All right,
so I'm just
NPV.
correcting. NPV, yeah.
Yes, thank you.
Mr. Chair, NPV stands for net present value. And the acronym WACC stands for weighted average cost of capital. So, Mr. Chair, what would happen is, so you have locomotives that you are procuring, and these locomotives obviously you're procuring with a view that they will add to the profitability of the business and will be self-sustaining and would basically generate cash to be able to pay for themselves. So what, Mr. Chair, this paragraph seeks to do is to say, over the life of these locomotives, remember they are now going to last for the next 30 years, and if we do modifications, they could last 50 years. Now, but you are obviously sitting here today. So what you're trying to do through this net present value calculation, Mr. Chair, is just to predict the cash flows of these locomotives over the life. But then you are saying, but these are future values. So they, they include escalations, inflation, and all of these things. But what is that value today? So you need to present value them back to today. And that is that 11.68 billion says basically, in simple terms, if you take all of the cash flows that these things will generate, less all of the costs, less all of the capital costs associated with the acquisition, you'll end up with 11.68 billion rand worth of profit in today's terms, right? But you will appreciate, Chair, that in order for you to bring something from the future to today, that future number will be bigger than the number today. So today's number will be smaller. So in order for you to bring it back to today, you have to discount it. So you project it first and then discount it back to present. Now that discounting factor, Mr. Chair, is either the hurdle rate or the weighted average cost of capital. So it's a factor that basically says, when you project something into the future, use a discount rate to discount it back to today's present value.
All right, so just to break it down, the updated NPV results in a positive NPV of 11.68, as you say, billion at the new hurdle rate of 15.2. And then the last sentence says the NPV would become negative 1.67 billion at the original hurdle rate. Okay. So when we talk about the original and updated, the original and the new hurdle rate, was the original hurdle rate used in the initial business case?
I would assume so, yes.
So on that hurdle rate, this you would not make a profit, you would make a loss.
Well, the NPV would become negative, yes.
Yeah. So a negative, as I understood it, you were saying that on the one you would make a profit, on the other you would make a loss.
Yes.
So it would be a positive 11.68 billion versus a negative 1.67 billion.
Yes.
All right. Now this updated or new hurdle rate of 15.2, where did that come from?
Mr. Chair, as we see in paragraph 81, it says the WACC and hurdle rates are updated annually for changes in economic conditions and are approved by the Transnet Exco and reviewed by external audit during year-end audit processes. So, Mr. Chair, these rates get reviewed and looked at annually, but I think they're actually approved biannually by the Transnet Exco. So they get reviewed annually and the changes occur and they then get approved at a review of the Exco every 2 years. So, Mr. Chair, this 15.2%, as I see it.
15.2,
Yes, the 15.2% that was used in the compilation of this memo, Mr. Chair, would have come through some sort of review process that was happening in Transnet at the time.
Okay, so just to date this is something that you stated when you signed it on the 21st of May, correct?
Yes, sir.
Now, could I take you, please, to some new documents that you'll find commencing at page, this is Transnet Bundle 5C, commencing at page 2023. 5C. Yo.
Is that in the same bundle? No, it can't be.
Transnet Bundle 5C, Chairperson.
Okay.
Page, sir?
I would like to take you, let's start at page 2023.
Sure.
2023. Are you there?
That is good.
So 2023, we have a document, weighted average cost of capital and hurdle rates policy. Do you see that?
That is good.
And the effective date of that on the face of it was 1 August 2012, correct?
That is correct.
Could I ask you please then to turn to page 1032?
1.
I beg your pardon, 2032? 2032. So we're on 2023. We now need to move to 2032.
2032. Yeah, okay, I'm there.
And what you see there is a series of 2 schedules at the foot of the page. You see there's a heading before the first two.
Don't lower your voice, Mr. Mybeck.
You see there's a heading before the first schedule that reads Greenfield. Do you see that?
That is correct.
And then you go to TFR and you see the hurdle rate is 18.56.
Yes.
So that's what is referred to as the original hurdle rate in your ETC memo.
That is correct, sir.
So perhaps you could just explain the concepts to us. Greenfields.
So a Greenfield project, Mr. Chair, is basically a chair that is a project that is relatively new and probably hasn't been undertaken before. It's characterized by a project that has significant, could also be characterized by a project that has a significant amount of risk attached to it.
All right, and then if I can ask you please to go to page 2068. What you see there is a similar document, weighted average cost of capital and hurdle rates policy, WACC policy. Do you see that?
Yes, sir.
And here it records the effective date as 31 March 2014. You see that?
That is correct, sir.
And it says signature, and that's your signature, is that right?
That is
Under
correct.
Group Chief Financial Officer.
That is correct, sir.
And just help us with that date, Mr. Singh.
It seems like it's the 20th of May 2014.
20 May 2014.
That is correct.
So that's the day before you signed the ETC increase memo.
That is correct.
And then if you go over the page to 2070, you'll see that it's signed by the Group Financial Planning General Manager, and then it's signed by you again. And what is that date? The same,
The same date.
20
Same.
May.
Yes.
But we see that there's no signature reflecting the final approval. You see that? And under that name of committee, Group Chief, Group Executive Committee, there's no signature there.
Neither was the one in 2012 either.
Okay. So that takes us to 20 May 2014. Now let's go then to page 2079.
2071.
2079.
Oh. (2079), yes.
So what you see similar to the 2013 policy is you've got a heading Greenfields. You see that towards the foot of that page?
Yes, sir.
And again, if we track to TFR, we get the Greenfields hurdle rate of 16.24%. Do you see that?
Yes, sir.
But we know in the ETC memo, you used the new hurdle rate of 15.2.
That is correct.
Where does one find reference to 15.2 in this document?
Mr. Chair, as I've indicated, that the 15.2 would have been the WACC rate that was prevalent at some point in time during the period during which this process was being undertaken. Mr. Chair, the reason why we state that is that this document is a document that evolves, let's call it from, well, actually, the auditors review the WACC rates sometime in September, October of each year because of the audit that they, well, not audit, but the review that they conduct for Transnet results. And they would have had to, we would have had to review the WACC to understand whether it was still applicable or not, given the changes in economic conditions. But it's not a very in-depth exercise. But when they do then come for the year-end audit, which starts sometime at the end of March, there is quite a significant in-depth exercise that's done by external audit in actually auditing the WACC. And in order for them to audit the WACC, Mr. Chair, we need to propose something for them to audit. So that process, Mr. Chair, starts in and around, I would say, March, April, and will probably conclude in sometime, probably sometime thereafter. They would, Mr. Chair, not accept a WACC that's not approved by Transnet because they have to have an official view of what the Transnet WACC is for them to then audit. Mr. Chair, this 12, what was the number? 15.2.
Yeah, that's what you
The
said.
15.2 number, Mr. Chair, would have been a number that was being considered by Transnet at a point in time during this review process, which ultimately led to the final approved document actually coming out at 16.24%, which was the actual document that was then signed off. Where Mr. Lehe obtained the 15.2% from Mr. Chair, he alleges that he obtained it from me. Mr. Chair, I don't recall having given him a 15.2 number. That number seems rather exact. So at that stage, Mr. Chair, each of the operating divisions would be engaging with Transnet Financial Planning, or Group Planning as they were called, to understand what the individual WACCs or WACC numbers would be, because the individual WACC numbers would then obviously impact the audits at their specific operating divisions. So we didn't allow for each operating division to come up with their own WACC. It was actually calculated centrally, audited centrally, and that information was then passed on to the operating divisions. And Mr. Chair, just also to give context, Mr. Chair, the memo had been prepared in April, but it effectively captured all the economic effects up to contract signing date. So as we have seen, the memo or the WACC document was actually approved on the 20th of May 2014, with the 16.24% reflected. But Mr. Chair, the 15.2% would have been the equivalent of the 16.24% during a period of time, during the evolution of this document.
Yes, well, all of that may be correct, but the point is that as at the 21st of May, when you signed this document, the hurdle rate, the new hurdle rate was not 15.2%, it was 16.24%, correct?
That is correct.
Right. And we know that this document was then put forward to the BADC on the 26th of May. And it was put forward to the Board of Directors on the 29th of May.
That is
On
correct.
both of those days, the new hurdle rate was not 15.2, it was 16.24.
That is correct.
So, and that's quite a large difference, isn't it? It's more than 1%.
Yes, sir.
It's 1.4%. Now, what would the effect of that have been on the profitability of this venture?
Well, Mr. Say, if you look at the memo, if you recall, the memo did say if we had the original hurdle rate of 18%, it would result in a negative NPV of 1.68 billion, I think, if I recall. Given the fact that this is 16%, I would hazard to say that the NPV would not be negative.
So you would what?
Would not be negative.
You would venture to say?
Well, I haven't calculated it, so I can only assume that it would not be.
You can only assume it wouldn't be.
Okay, then I would say it would not be.
Okay. But Mr. Singh, you understand this is a very important issue.
Yes, and I'm responding by saying that the 16.24% versus the 15.2% would not result in a negative NPV.
And is it a simple mathematical calculation that can be undertaken?
No, I don't think it's
No,
just
because we asked Mr. Chaubi if he could do this for us. He said it would take 3 weeks.
That's my point. It's not a...
So you're really guessing?
Well, you're asking me, and I'm saying to you, it would not. Intuitively, it would not. It would not take 3 weeks. It's not 3 weeks. That's an exaggeration.
Sorry?
But, Mr. Chair, the other
Mr.
reason
Singh,
why...
sorry, I can't hear you, and I need to understand precisely what you're saying here. Because what's represented to the BADC and what's represented to the board is that this is a profitable venture at the wrong hurdle rate. Now, if it was 16.24, are you saying it could be one way or the other? It's marginal, or what are we talking here?
Well, Mr. Chair, talking on the point of misrepresentation, if I wanted to misrepresent to the board, I would have not included the fact that at 18.24%, the business venture would have been negative 1.68 billion.
But are you, without wanting, I know it's late in the evening now, are you able to, because there's going to be another sitting, are you able to run this figure for us by the next sitting?
Well, Mr. Chair, if we are going to the point of saying, let us understand what the NPV of this project is, then we need to go back to, I think it is page 9 or 11 of the business case, that also says that all the potential impacts of operational efficiencies of the new locomotives have not been included in the business case. And the reason for that was to ensure that we had a conservative business case that we put forward. So if we want to recalculate the NPV of this business case, then we should go and assess what the operational efficiencies of this locomotives would be included in the business case, and then apply the new WACC. And then you'll get an answer.
Well, my question is, could you do that by the next sitting?
No, Mr. Chair, we cannot do that by the next sitting, as TFR can only do this. They can only assess the operational efficiency of those new locomotives.
All right, so what I need to do then is to go in search of where you got this 15.2% from. Now, as I understand
Mr. Chair, I did not get the 15.2. I did not give Mr. Lehe the 15.2.
Oh, so this is her mistake.
We've given you an affidavit to that extent, Mr. Chair.
Okay, but just I don't want to quarrel with you. I just need to understand what happened. So, do I understand you to say this is not your figure? You didn't give her 15.2%?
I did not give 15.2%.
Okay. Do you know where this 15.2 comes from?
No, sir.
So do I understand you to be saying, and correct me if I'm wrong, that it's Mr. Leher that put this in here?
That is correct, sir.
All right. So let's carry on with these hurdle rate documents. Now, if you go to page 2110.
2110.
Yeah. So you'll see that this is an email from Yusuf Leher to Mr. Garma.
That is correct.
And it says, "Hi, SEER. In a nutshell, the NPV became negative." And it's also importantly on the 25th of March, 2014. "Hi, SEER. In a nutshell, the NPV became negative because the assumptions have changed since, i.e. the price per loco, etc. Further to Francis's email below," that we know is Francis Callard, "if the hurdle rate is adjusted to the latest Transnet issued hurdle rate, then the NPV will become positive again. Francis will rerun the numbers based on the latest hurdle rate." Next paragraph. "The Transnet hurdle rate changed very recently from 18% to about 15%. In brackets, it changed last week, I think." See that?
Yes, sir.
Now, we're going to come to Mr. Leher's evidence. Mr. Leher's evidence is that you told him that.
So then why didn't he say that? That according to Anoj, this had changed.
Yeah.
He does not say that.
No, he doesn't say that.
Yes.
But that's his evidence.
But that's why I'm saying I disagree with it.
All right. Now, just so that we understand it, is this a policy, this hurdle rate policy? It's something that falls very much within your domain. I mean, we see that you approve it. This is your baby, really.
That is correct.
But let me take you then, if I may, to the minutes of a Capital Investment Committee meeting on the 18th of March 2014. Those you find at page 2122. See, it says draft minutes of Transnet Capital Investment Committee meeting, number 14/3, held on Tuesday, 18 March, 9 o'clock, etc. And there present, Mr. Singh, you were the acting chairperson of the Capital Investment Committee. Is that correct?
Based on the minutes, yes.
Now, if I take you, please, to page 2132, the WACC policy and hurdle rates, because we know there was an amendment in the pipeline. It was discussed at this meeting. You see
That is correct.
Paragraph 7.5, correct?
Yes, sir.
At 752, it was noted that the recommendation was not a policy change, but changes to the hurdle rates. It was agreed that the submission be revised accordingly. It was further requested that consultations be held with OD executive committees to discuss the suggested revised rates as well as the regulatory matters. Now, what does OD stand for?
Operating division.
It was resolved, you'll see, that the committee recommends the proposed revised hurdle rates as contained in the table WACC policy, subject to consultations with the OD executive committees, as well as the regulatory matters before tabling at group executive committee. Correct?
That is correct.
So then let's go to page 2135. These are now the minutes of a group executive committee held on the 25th of March, 2014. You see, it reflects Mr. Malefe as being present, under that Mr. Gama being present, and then you as well. I see that's in alphabetical order. You see Singh. You confirm you were there?
Yes.
And then, if I could take you please to paragraph 5.9 at page 2140. Again, hurdle rate and weighted average cost of capital policy is discussed. You confirm that?
2140. Oh, yes.
2140.
5.9, yes.
Paragraph 59, yeah.
Yes.
I could take you over the page to 2141 and direct your attention to paragraph 5.9.4. The committee was requested to approve the nominal post-tax WACC of 12.7%. There will be a better understanding of WACC post the Delta process. The chairperson, now that chairperson is Mr. Malefe, correct?
Yes.
The chairperson stated that there's always been a disagreement over the WACC issue since he assumed office. He requested that a memorandum be submitted to his office that clearly articulates the proposed amendments. You see that?
That is correct.
Mr. Value stated that based on the WACC computation, TE provided the least risk in the company. Mr. Garma stated that WACC becomes a sensitive discussion item during contract negotiations. He sought clarity on the most suitable WACC to utilize and requested guidance on the company's reasonable cost of equity. Mr. Singh stated that the challenges in contract negotiations were real WACC and hurdle rates. See that?
Yes, I see.
Then at 5.9.6, Mr. Singh indicated that the submission will be presented to the OD/SU for consideration. What does SU stand for?
Special units.
And then just above paragraph 5.10, you see the committee noted the hurdle rate and weighted average cost of capital policy. So no acceptance there. Correct?
That is correct.
Then if I can take you please to page 2159. So what you find here is an email from Yusuf Mohammed. To various persons, CC'd to you, and it's March Exco feedback. We're dealing with the March Exco now. And it records, please note following, the hurdle rate and WACC policy was not approved. Redo the memo to explain the changes, Delta view. Please get a slot in each OD Exco in April to explain the OD specific WACCs and the changes year on year to the drivers. You see that?
That is correct.
And then what we have found is at page 2161. Now this is on the 12th of May. And this seems to be after an approval from Thabo Bello to Yusuf Mohammed. It says the table and explanation below depict TRF, WACC and hurdle rates. And then you will see there's 2012/13 approved rate. There you see the 1856. And then at the bottom, you see 2014/15 approved rate, and there you see the 16.24. Do you see that?
That is correct.
And then that accords with the policy that you signed on the 20th of May, correct?
That is correct.
Could I please take you to made reference to your affidavit.
Just before we move off this
Yes.
page, can I just make a comment on 2161? Mr. Chair, if you have reference to 2161, you will see that on Monday, 12 May 2014, Mr. Lebello sends to Mr. Mohammed the WACC rates as Mr. Myberg has outlined. But Mr. Mohammed then also sends it to Mr. Lehe on the 12th of May 2014 at 12:31, as you can see at the top of the page.
Sorry, I'm just missing you. What page are you on?
I'm saying 2161, we've just,
The last email
yes.
to 2161. So your point is?
So I'm saying-
So at the top it says Yusuf Mohammed. Okay,
Mr. Mohammed is basically sending to Mr. Lehe the TFR, WACC and hurdle rates
all right.
on the 12th of May 2014. So Mr. Lehe was in possession of the WACC rates, the final WACC rates, from Mr. Mohammed.
Right.
And as you previously pointed out in the previous email to Sia, or to Mr. Gama, he was also in possession of the 15% from somebody at Transnet Group. So he was obviously in communication with understanding the evolution of this WACC rate during this period of time.
All right, Mr. Singh, I'm not going to debate that with you, the evolution. Let's have a look at your affidavit. Can you go please to 1486?
Sorry, which bundle are you? Same one.
5C. I think it might be the same, maybe the same file. 1486?
Yes, on this.
Okay, so I just want to take you through this. You deal with unprofitable project and hurdle rate reduction. You say, I was open and transparent to the Board of Directors regarding the impact of the increased ETC on the original NPV and WACC rate, in that I presume it resulted in a negative NPV for the project, correct?
Yes.
I deny the fact that the project was loss-making as alleged by Chabi. I deny that the hurdle rate had to be changed to make the project profitable again. I deny that there was no approved policy to support the change in the hurdle rate as claimed. And then you say at 245, the reasons for each of the above conclusions is contained in my response to Yusuf Leher's supplementary affidavit, which deals with the subject of the WACC and hurdle rate policy. Now, where do you respond to Mr. Leher's supplementary affidavit?
I think in one of our affidavits, I'm not too sure the date.
I see at 1518, you do respond to a statement by Yusuf Leher.
1518.
18, yeah. Is that what you're referring to?
Yes, I think so. I think this is the one.
Perhaps I could just finish off, I see it's almost 9 o'clock, by asking you something that I could then think about before we reconvene. At 246, you say the table below summarizes the status of the NPV and various hurdle and WACC rates. And as can be seen, even when the approved WACC and hurdle rates are used, that would not result in the project being unprofitable. Now you refer to 31 May 2014. And there we've got 16.24. Then you've got a column in the middle, 31 March 2014, and there's the 15.2. Where did you get that from?
I'm sorry, Mr. Maybeck. I went to 1518, but I think you have moved beyond that.
1487. Sorry, I went going back there.
1487.
1487. So
Okay.
there's a schedule in the middle. So March 13, it's 1856 that we've seen.
Yes, I can see that.
31 May 2014, it's 16.24 that we've seen. Where do you get the 31 March 2014 15.2 from? I understood your evidence to be, well, Mr. Leher put it in there. You don't know where it came from.
I'll have to go back and check where I did get that number from.
All right. Perhaps, Chairperson, this may be a convenient time to take the adjournment.
Yeah.
Oh, so this, I recall this. So this is basically taken from the board memo.
What?
From the board memo.
The board memo.
Yes. If you recall, basically we said at the revised hurdle rate you had a 16.02 NPV, and at the 12.6 WACC you had a 22.71 NPV.
You took that from the memo?
Yes, I just referenced it back to the contract signing.
The ETC increase memo?
Yes.
All right, thank you.
The date 31 March was referenced, by and large, the period of time when we actually signed the locomotive supply agreement, 17 March.
Thank you.
Unfortunately, we are not able to finish. I'll have to try and find time that we don't have somewhere. What's your estimate of how much time we might need?
We're certainly nearing the end, DCJ.
Yes.
I think probably half a day.
Half a day? Okay, all right. I think in probably tomorrow or in the next few days we will try and sort that out.
Half a day or an evening?
Or an evening, yeah. For what it's worth, Counsel for Mr. Singh, are you able to indicate that maybe from now up to when your evenings are reasonably flexible without being specific?
Chairperson, we're not available at all this week or next week, not
Yeah.
in the day nor in the evenings. Both
Yeah.
my attorney and myself, we've got previous commitments
Yeah.
that we can't, we already had to deal with tonight to make ourselves available.
Okay, all right. I'll have a look and then fix the date and time. Okay, thank you to everybody. Thank you, Mr. Singh, and to your legal team. Thank you, Mr. Maybeck, and your team, and the technicians and the staff. Thank you to everybody. For the benefit of the public, tomorrow the commission will not sit in the morning, but will start at 3 o'clock to hear some evidence relating to PRASA initially, and then later we'll hear evidence, I'll hear evidence relating to Transnet, Mr. Gary Peter. I'll also hear evidence from one of the investigators of the commission. We adjourn.